Did The Simpsons predict Putin starting World War III? To be completely honest, I guess the short answer is no. The long answer is kind of, and here's how. Of course, the entire world has been watching the rapidly worsening tensions between Russia and Ukraine for weeks now. But really, this whole ordeal stems back way further. Since 2014, when Russia invaded and annexed Crimea, people have been talking about the potential of a new Cold War, and sometimes, in the worst of times, a potential Third World War erupting as a result of this now new impending invasion. US-Russia relations are the worst they've been since the fall of the Berlin Wall, and Russian foreign policy is getting quite aggressive. Every day it seems as though there is more new news to be seen and heard in regards to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and most recently, the news has seen some sanctions being placed on Russia by other countries in an effort to get the situation to de-escalate. While things certainly are terrible, maybe they weren't really all that unpredictable. When we take a look back at the 1998 episode of The Simpsons titled Simpson Tide, which was the 19th episode of the 9th season, you'll see what I'm talking about. Warning, spoilers ahead. I mean, at this point you've had like 24 years to view it, so probably don't have to say spoilers. In the episode, Homer almost causes the entire nuclear power plant that he works at to go into meltdown because he put a donut into the reactor core to make it bigger. This, of course, ends up in him being fired by Mr. Burns. After he is fired from his job, he is at home and suddenly on the TV he notices that there is a recruitment advertisement which is looking to get some new people enlisted in the Naval Reserve. Homer decides that perhaps this should be his new career path, and he goes forth and enlists, with Moe, Barney, and Apu following suit shortly after. All the while this is going on, Bart purchases an earring and Homer gets upset about it and confiscates it. After this, while in the midst of his naval service, Homer and the others are placed onto a nuclear submarine. They begin to participate in a military exercise, but of course, this is a Simpsons episode, and it's Homer Simpson here, so something is bound to go awry. Homer ends up accidentally having the captain of the submarine fired out of a torpedo tube, and then proceeds to pilot the ship into Russian waters. Of course, this is seen as an attempt to defect, which then goes on to create political division between the USA and Russia. This then somehow leads to the revelation that the Soviet Union in fact was never dissolved. In true Simpsons fashion, we see the Berlin Wall rise up from the ground, we see Soviet troops with weapons and tanks in the streets, and we even see Vladimir Lenin rise up from his Moscow tomb. It's definitely quite a macabre experience, even in a silly animated television show. From there, nuclear war is now being anticipated until the US Navy goes on to drop depth charges onto the submarine that Homer's in. These are meant to either destroy it or force it up to the surface, but what it does is cause a pinhole leak in the hull of the submarine. Remember when I said that thing about Bart and the earring, and maybe you thought it was kind of weird and random that I included it? Well, there is of course a reason. Homer takes this confiscated earring he has and uses it to plug the leak, which, of course, saves the submarine. In the end, just because it feels like I should explain how the story ends after just telling you everything else that happened, the submarine surfaces and Homer is taken away to stand before the court-martial, but in the end, because the officers on the review committee have done a slew of awful things, they end up giving Homer the punishment of mild dishonorable discharge, and then Homer goes home and forgives Bart because, as it turns out, the earring saved his life. It's a wonderful, happy ending. So, you see what I mean? No. The Simpsons did not predict Putin starting World War III. Of course, there is the joke in there about how improbable it would be to bring back the Soviet Union. I mean, with the literal push of a button. That is not to say that the imminent threat of Ukraine being invaded means that anyone is trying to bring the Soviet Union back, but what is important and what the episode did do is accurately capture the continuity or the similarities between Russia today and the Soviet Union. And with that, I mean its Eastern European aggression and anti-Western politics. It's interesting, however, when we look at the history of Russia, even before the Soviet Union, back to the Russian Empire of the 18th and 19th centuries. We see some of the same views or ideas and kind of how Russia views itself in comparison to the rest of the world. We've seen Russia go from a royal empire to a totalitarian communist union to the capitalist federal state we see today, and while these are all grand transformations, some things have truly remained consistent. I mean, just yesterday, Putin himself made an hour-long address in which he described Ukraine as an integral part of his country's history, and he described Eastern Ukraine as, quote, ancient Russian lands. And this is, of course, the exact opposite of what those in Ukraine are saying. The episode also represented something that was likely true at the time, and definitely continues to be true, and that is the tension between Russia and the US itself. Just lately, as the news spread that Russia ordered troops into rebel-held regions, Russia has said that the troops have not yet been deployed, but that they will be, quote, peacekeeping in the regions. The United States responded to this by explaining that they felt calling them peacekeepers was, quote, nonsense, and continued on to accuse Russia of creating a pretext for war. It seems almost as if everyone is just waiting for someone to strike first, and it truly is terrifying. The swift reaction to the rogue submarine in the episode, although trivial and silly because it's a Simpsons episode, definitely kind of reflects this in a way. Right now, the US, along with other Western powers, have rallied together to stand behind Ukraine and have begun promising some swift sanctions, some of which are already being enacted. It's truly troubling and terrifying to watch as this all unfolds. So, I guess that was a long way of saying that no, The Simpsons did not predict Putin starting World War III, but what they might have done is just show how little has changed in the last 24 years. Alright guys, that has been our video for today. Thank you so much for checking